A college education is one of the best gifts you can give a child. It is also one of the most expensive. A college savings account can help that education become affordable and minimize the need to take out college loans. I'm Anthony Contrucci. Join me from the University of Notre Dame where we explore some of the options to financially prepare for your child's college education through some of the established savings vehicles such as a 529 plan.
This program is made possible by PSCA, the Plan Sponsor Council of America. For over 60 years, PSCA has served retirement plan sponsors through education, advocacy, and research. Information at psca.org or at 312-419-1863.
What are our biggest fears about this planning process? I think for me, certainly it's that idea, that we are not saving aggressively enough. And, when I think about that you would hate for that to be an obstacle for our children. We would hate for that to be an obstacle for our children if and when, the time comes for them to go to college. As parents, I think it's a natural feeling, it's a natural instinct to really want to do as much as we are able to support those dreams.
Some of the biggest fears for me in the planning process, and Steve may differ, was just the overwhelming options and the unknown of how much is enough, which is the best plan, the unknown about how do I know which reality is going to be presenting itself when my children are ready to go to school. That was the biggest hurdle for me until we just kind of sat down and plowed through the information.
Mary, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be talking about saving for college, and more specifically, what are some of the tools, some of the products that are out there for families to assist them in starting this process. So maybe we can kick it off with that. What are some of the typical savings options that the average family can utilize to prepare their family, their kids for college?
Yeah, when evaluating different college savings vehicles that are out there, typically you would look at the tax provisions for each of the different options. So there are typical investment vehicles like a mutual fund that has no specific special tax treatment to be used for higher education. And then there are other options such as like retirement funds, IRAs, that have special provisions that allow you to use it for higher education. And then there are vehicles that are specifically designed to be used for education, and those are the Coverdell's and the 529 plans.
Can you please expand on what is a 529 and how do they work?
A 529 plan is a tax-advantaged savings vehicle to be used for higher education. It's been authorized by Section 529 of the Internal Revenue Code. Within 529 plans, there are prepaid tuition programs as well as 529 savings plans, and they're all authorized by either state governments or there's one private college 529 plan that's authorized and sponsored by the private colleges across the nation.
So Mary, you referenced higher education and higher education costs. What qualifies as a higher education expense or cost? And does that only pertain to college, or does that pertain to maybe future education like trade schools or graduate programs, et cetera, after college, after undergrad?
Yeah, so you can use a 529 plan. In a qualified higher education expense could cover all of those things. So really the important is that it's a 2 or 4 year accredited school. It could be a trade school, it could be a vocational school, it could be a community college, it could be a, your traditional 4-year school. It could be used for graduate school, it could be used for professional school. You have a son who wants to become a doctor, you have a daughter who wants to become an attorney. You can use it for all of those types of educational expenses. It just has to be for tuition, room and board, mandatory fees, and mandatory supplies.
So anything that's directly tied to the expense of going to a college or a higher education?
Absolutely, okay. Absolutely.
Mary, one of the things that I just picked up on was you mentioned a couple of times this concept of 529 plans being tax advantaged. What are some of the tax advantages of these plans?
529 plans grow federal tax deferred, and when you withdraw, as long as you're using them for qualified higher education expenses, they actually can be withdrawn tax-free.
It sounds like a pretty neat and powerful tool. this concept of this 529. I know there's different types of it, but there's not just a couple different types. I mean, what I've kind of seen and heard is there could be over 100+ different 529 plans, and each of them have different investment options. You know, how does a family kind of, you know, navigate through, I mean, all this noise and all these different options to find the one that's right for them?
Yeah, so there are over 100 different 529 plans, and that can be very daunting when you're looking at it that way. You know, most states, I think 49 out of the 50 states sponsor a 529 plan, or at least one 529 plan, if not multiple. You know, there's also the private college 529 plan, which is a consortium of private schools who have gotten together and said that they want to make private education affordable, and they offer a prepaid tuition program. So really, we offer a framework as to how do you evaluate the different 529 plans. So we're looking at, you know, are you someone who wants a guaranteed tuition benefit, you know, a prepaid tuition program, or are you someone that wants you want to incur a little bit of market risk and have, you know, opportunities to grow and things of that sort, and then you would use a 529 savings plan. So, you know, that's kind of the first question that you want to decide is, are you someone who wants to have a 529 college savings plan, or are you someone who wants to have a prepaid tuition program? Now, what's important to understand with those is a prepaid tuition program, that is really to be used for tuition. So you're locking in today's tuition to be used sometime in the near future or sometime in the future, whether it could be 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, 20 years down the road. But you're paying today's tuition rates. So it's a guaranteed benefit. Now, the other side would be the savings plans. And the savings plans can be used for tuition and fees, as well as, you know, no different than the prepaid 529 plans, but they can also be used for room and board, and they can be used for those mandatory expenses. So, you know, a family, when they're looking at how they want to create a college savings plan for them, they could pick one or the other, or maybe even a combination to meet their needs.
It's a great plan and a program, and you receive a tax credit in ultimately doing it. So it's really a great idea to take a close look at the 529 plan.
Particularly from Indiana.
So how can one leverage, because again, it sounds like there's a lot of different states that offer 529 plans. How does one leverage that?
So really one of the steps that you want to take is you want to look at the state that you reside in. You want to look at what the plans are for that state. So, and you want to look at the tax implications. So many states offer some sort of tax benefit, either, you know, a credit or a deduction, or maybe they offer a match. And so, you know, if you're in Indiana, we offer a fantastic tax credit in Indiana. And so if you contribute up to $5,000, you get 20% of that contribution as a tax credit. You put in $5,000, you get $1,000 straight off your tax liability. If you put in $4,000, you get $800, and so on and so forth. If you live in Illinois, they offer a tax deduction for up to $10,000 if you're single, and $20,000 if you're married. So these are some fantastic tax benefits that really help, that you could use to help boost your college savings plans.
That's interesting. Tell me a little bit, you mentioned a match earlier. Tell me a little bit about a match, maybe what states offer this match and kind of how it works.
Yeah, so there are a few states that are out there. There are actually very few of them, but they'll offer, you know, if you contribute $500, they might match and actually contribute into the account maybe $100.
Interesting.
What's actually kind of interesting that's starting to pick up, and we have a little bit of in Indiana, is we have the Promise program, and so that's where a community has gotten together, and they've decided to match contributions into children's savings accounts for particular cities and counties.
The Indiana Education Savings Authority is a quasi-state agency that's run out of the state treasurer's office here in the state of Indiana. With that, we oversee all of the College Choice 529 plans, but we've also just taken on a new endeavor of entering the matching grant program that's called Promise Indiana. Promise Indiana is a grant program that we're piloting in 4 counties now, and it's a great way to start getting those children set on the college-bound identity early. So the way the Promise works is we've got 4 pilot counties that are participating, and each of those counties has determined what grade levels they'd like to participate. Most of the counties are doing kindergarten through 3rd grade, and how that works is we actually infiltrate and go into every school registration event in those counties. So the parents are set up as they get their folders, they're signing up for lunches, they're signing up for PE classes, and then they stop by our table. And we've got a streamlined enrollment process that allows them to open up a 529 in less than 3 minutes. With that, The child receives a certificate right there on the site, so we congratulate them on opening up their College Choice 529 plan. Just for taking that step, we have an enrollment sponsor that donates $25, the first $25 into that child's college savings account, just for taking that step to open it up. The important piece of that is that we've leveraged local volunteers to do that. So it's not staff members of mine coming down or coming up from Indianapolis to do this. It's the teachers, the principals, the staff members that these parents know and trust. Ultimately, we hope that these accounts that we were establishing for them early, we start changing that culture in those communities, raising those, not just the student expectations, but the parent expectations to where they take an active role in it, and whether they're saving, $10 a month or $1,000 a month, that every little bit helps, and it can get them there.
You mentioned earlier this consortium of, I think it was 270 private universities throughout the country, correct?
Correct.
And if I want to participate in that, hypothetically, for my children, do I have to select which schools, like my top 4 or 5 for them? Or
No.
is it just a blanket?
No, so it's blanket. So with the private College 529 plan, it's an interesting vehicle because you have 275 private schools who have gotten together and said that they want to make private education affordable. And so the way they've done that is they've said that they will actually incur the investment risk. So the schools are bearing the risk for any of the contributions into the plan. They're guaranteeing your tuition certificate across all 275 schools. So what you can do is you can kind of look at how your contributions are growing, and you can tag 5 different schools, and they're your favorite schools, to say, I've put in $10,000, what is that getting me at Notre Dame? I put in $10,000, what is that getting me at Princeton, or at Stanford or St. Mary's? So there's a way for you to see that automatically, and those are called your favorite schools. But
you're not locked into those schools. So hypothetically, your child doesn't get into the schools academically,
Yeah.
and now you're locked into these schools. That could be an issue.
No, and so
Okay.
the consortium has schools all across the U.S., so it is the only nationwide plan, and it's every single different, talent types, every single different types of academic rigor, interests, everything is kind of covered within the consortium of schools. There's also ways to get your money out of the accounts if your child decides to go to IU or Purdue. So you can actually go through a withdrawal process for that.
So our current process, and it has been for the past 10 years, has been to save anywhere between $25 for our little child, or our middle child actually, to about $75 a month for our oldest girl. And at some point we need to consider re-upping what we're contributing to our private 529 plan, because the cost of education is only increasing every day, and so we should increase our contributions.
So Mary, if a family decides to go down this road and utilize a 529 as a vehicle to save for college, do they need to open one per child, or can you open one for all of your children? I mean, how does that work?
Really you can open just one and put all your resources in one. You have, really high limits. Limits are right around $300,000 to be put total into an account. But a lot of families actually open one per child so that they can keep the funds separate for each child.
So now let's say, Mary, a family has decided to utilize this vehicle, okay, whether it's going to be one for all of their children or one per child. How do they then go about determining what investment options are best for them?
Yeah, so really they want to start looking at, do they want to do the research, do the monitoring, select the options themselves? If that's the case, they're going to want to go into a direct 529 plan. If they don't want to really deal with that themselves and they want to have, a financial advisor help them, then they're going to go with an advisor sold plan.
So let me make sure I understand you. So if a family is leveraging a direct option, that means they're going direct to the state to
Yes.
procure this?
Yes,
Okay.
so they're going directly on the website, they're opening the account themselves, and they're doing all the research themselves, they're reading all the information themselves, and they are selecting the plan and funding the account directly through themselves. Now, if they wanted to use the financial advisor, they wanted someone to help them research the different options, a financial advisor is going to have different set of options typically available to them. And so if they wanted to use the advisor for those, you would go through the advisor sold plan.
So Mary, you mentioned earlier that, again, there's all these various states and these state options. So hypothetical family lives in the state of Indiana, the parents themselves, let's say, open up a 529 plan for their children. in the state of Indiana to reap some of those benefits. Let's say the in-laws or the grandparents or the parents living out in the state of Illinois, for example. Should they then open one there? Or what would your advice be, or what's like a best practice?
You know, I think in that situation, you have someone who lives in Indiana, they might really feel that the Indiana plan meets their needs. And so the benefit to using the Indiana plan is going to be the state tax benefit, and that's that state tax credit. The grandparent who lives in Illinois, Illinois has also, as we talked about, the tax deduction. And so that might sway the grandparent to open their own account in Illinois rather than sending the money over to the Indiana plan, which may not give them, any sort of tax break on that contribution.
Would there be any reason why I, for example, resident of Indiana, would want to open one in Illinois or in another state?
Everyone has different investment needs. Some people really want to have all their resources, maintained by one specific manager. So you might want all of your money housed in, a state that's going to be using that one particular manager. People look at investment returns. So you might feel that the state tax benefits that you're receiving isn't going to outweigh some potential, returns that you might feel you might get with a different plan.
I have a question for you about static versus age-based options. There's all these different options, and those are two that I've heard a lot about. Can you maybe expand on that a little bit for our viewers, what the differences are?
Yeah, so with an age-based option, what's happening is when your child is young, there's an automatic asset allocation that's being assigned to that fund. So maybe it's the newborn fund, and it's going to be most likely heavily equity based, and it's going to have very little in fixed income, very little in debt and cash. And then as the child approaches college age, it actually changes, that asset allocation changes, so it becomes more heavily weighted on the fixed income, so the debt and cash, and less weighted on the equities. So it becomes more conservative as your child ages and becomes college ready, so that those assets are there and they retain their value. Now, a static option is going to stay the same the entire time until you change your option. So if you choose one of the equity-based options, it's going to stay exactly the same the entire time that your funds are in that fund.
So in essence, with the static option, you can almost pick your risk tolerance and it stays pegged to that the entire time?
No, not necessarily, because what's happening is, let's say you choose equity growth, and that's the option that you choose. Well, equity growth is going to be riskier, and you might be okay with it being riskier, but then when your child's 17 years old and you're in that equity growth, it hasn't automatically ratcheted down the risk factor. So you're still in equity growth.
Correct.
So when you have a 20% decline as we had in 2008, then that fund is also going to decline.
This sounds a lot like on the age-based, kind of like almost like we call a life cycle or target date fund, where there's an inherent glide path over the life of this instrument, right?
Right.
The static one sounds more like just kind of like a buy and hold, where you're saying, okay, this is my tolerance, today, and if you don't, to your point, if you don't change it in the future, if you don't change it, when that child's 17 or 18 about to go to college and there's a big market correction, that would absolutely affect the value then that you have saved for college.
Absolutely.
So it can be a benefit because maybe it's more aggressive over a longer period of time. You have more exposure to something like an equity position or profile. But again, it can come back and bite you because, again, if there's that market correction, a lot of those gains can be wiped out pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
So just, I think, something for our viewers to be aware of.
And and I think it works the other way too. So you have someone who's extremely conservative. If they are extremely conservative from the get-go and they have all their assets in fixed income when the child is a newborn, they miss out on some of the opportunities that potentially a higher weighted equity fund would give them.
I agree, 100%. And again, there's no right or wrong.
No.
I mean, the reality is it's whatever best for that family. But again, just great things to think about.
Absolutely.
In making those decisions.
And a lot of it deals with, your investment personality. What is your investment personality? How do you pick the right fund or a combination of funds that meets that investment personality and your risk tolerance? And so everyone has different options, and every state tries to work with those options and tries to give you a wide variety. There are certain people who say, you know what, I want to make sure that I'm in a principal guaranteed option. So a lot of states have principal guaranteed. Indiana has CD options. So you still get the tax benefits of using a 529 plan, but then you have, different.
You're avoiding the market risk in that case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So maybe, less return, but obviously less risk, which for some people, that's what they're looking for?
We have 2 small children. Isabel is 10 and Michael is 8.5. And we started saving for college actually because my parents actually gave us a gift during Christmas when they were very, very small. So that was how we initially started to save, was from a gift from parents. And then as the circumstances in our family changed, we just added to that as we were able to, until we actually were able to form a solid plan.
There's an expression you're probably familiar with. This is, it takes a village. And so that being said, how can a family get involved in this, specifically maybe grandparents, for example, in this saving for college process? What are some things that they can do to contribute?
I think gifts are fantastic. I think, as grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends, there are many gifting opportunities that a child might have. And so birthdays, Christmas, estate planning, these are all things that could be done to help boost those college savings accounts. If a family is using a 529 plan, each and every one of those plans has gifting opportunities and has mechanisms in place so that families can deposit resources and funds directly into the plans. There's actually even a gift card, that's a college savings gift card. So there's all different kinds of things that are out there that helps a family participate and be part of that college savings process and gift resources to them. No child needs an extra, toy or, things that are gonna get broken, but absolutely college savings is an investment and a gift that will last forever.
Mary, this has been a wonderful conversation, truly dynamic, and as always I feel like happens to me, we're running out of time, so I want to make sure we hit on a couple key additional questions before time expires. One of the things I'd like to know, and I'm sure our viewers want to know as well, is we fast forward, you've utilized this vehicle maybe for 10, 15, 20 years. For whatever reason, one of your children or your children don't need these funds anymore or don't intend to go to college. What happens there? I mean, are there any penalties? How does one get access to these funds or divest from this product? Maybe share a little bit about that for us.
Yeah, so really there are options. And so if your child decides not to go to college, you can roll it over to another beneficiary. So that's always one option.
So for example, I have 2 children, one of them doesn't want to, I could just change the titling, the beneficiary to my other child.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And there's no penalty with that?
No, there's no penalty at all with that. You might decide yourself you want to go to higher ed. You might want a higher degree, and so you might decide to change the beneficiary to yourself or to your spouse. You might have a cousin or a niece or a nephew, and you might want to change the beneficiary that way as well, and that's absolutely can happen without it being a taxable event.
So very flexible.
It is very flexible. Okay. If you decide you really need to gain access to those funds, you can actually withdraw it as well, and so you just put in for a withdrawal. You'll have to pay the penalties, which is you'll have to pay the taxes on them as well as a 10% penalty.
So and that penalty is, there's always a penalty regardless of how long you hold this product for?
As long as you're not using it for a qualified higher education expense. So if you are using it for a qualified higher education expense, it grows tax deferred and the withdrawals are tax free. But if you are withdrawing it for something other than a qualified higher education expenses, yes, you'll have to pay the taxes on it and you'll have to pay the penalty.
Speaking of maybe not utilizing these funds, so you mentioned earlier in the segment the consortium of the 275, I think, plus private universities throughout the country. What happens, let's say, if the school that my child ultimately picks or selects to go to is not part of that pool? How does that work with the funds?
Yeah, so for the private college 529 plan, what's going to happen is you can, again, change your beneficiary. So you decide, child A doesn't want to go to one of the consortium schools, but child B does want to go to one of the consortium schools. So change the beneficiary. That's an easy to do. The other option that you can do is you can actually qualify for a refund. And so you would just put in, you want a refund, you want it to go into maybe an Indiana 529 plan or a rollover, another 529 plan, or you might just want the assets out yourself. And so it'll go through a refund calculation, and that is plus or minus 2% for every year. So you're not gonna gain a whole lot of money using that plan as a primary savings opportunity or primary savings plan, but you're also not gonna lose a whole lot of money.
Okay, so and there's no penalty if you did that rollover from that plan to another 529 plan? No major penalty?
No,
Okay.
no.
Okay.
No.
Wonderful. So I'm sold. How do my viewers go ahead and open an account? I mean, is it easy or is it complicated?
No, it's super easy. It takes like maybe 15, 20 minutes to go online. If you're doing a direct option, you go online with your social security number, your successor account owner, and you can open one. Identify who your beneficiary is. Again, you identify them by their social security number and their name, and then just go ahead and put it into funds. Pick out your investment option and start contributing.
Mary, thank you so very much for being here today and for this great conversation. I know I learned a lot.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching Money Sense. I hope you had as much fun as I have. Remember, I'm your host, Anthony Contrucci, and I always try to make finance fun.
This program is made possible by PSCA, the Plan Sponsor Council of America. For over 60 years, PSCA has served retirement plan sponsors through education, advocacy, and research. Information at psca.org or at 312-419-1863. This program was produced by Lakeshore Public Media and Centier Bank.